Now that we've got the bird all boraxed, we want to talk a little bit about the position that it's going to be in. If you look on your screen right now, you'll see a shoveler that's in a standing pose, standing on one leg with its wing out and the head tucked. That's the pose that we're going to be doing on this bird. We're going to be using one of my standard Farabee bird bodies that I pretty much use on all of my duck mounts. We'll be using 3/4 inch foam necking. Some of the tools that we're going to be using, if you come over this way, you can see we have our job toolbox set up just for the bird department. We have one of these for each department: the turkey, the fish, the big game, and the small bird department. These are great. You can load up all your tools in all these different drawers. We have a lot of our wing supplies here. We've got eye rings and tape. You can store your Dremels, different caulking. They have a lot of nice shelf space, paper towel racks. These things are great. I'd highly recommend one of these for your shop if you don't have one already. We're going to be mounting the bird on this Mackenzie habitat base, and it's going to work great for the standing pose. It's going to be on one leg. It's just a perfect scene for a wood duck. We've got the leaves, and it just looks like something a wood duck would be standing on. One thing that I want to touch on quickly before we get started on the fun part of the mounting process is reference material. You cannot have enough good reference material to be looking at while you're working not only on small birds, but any part of taxidermy. One of the books that I really like for small birds is this duck hunting book. I'm sure you can find this on different spots on the internet. It has a lot of very nice reference photos inside of it of all the different duck species. It also goes over some of the biofacts on them. And one thing that's really nice is it talks about not only the head painting, but also talks about the feet coloration on all these different puddle ducks and diver ducks. That's an invaluable resource. We do have a lot of reference photos for you on Insider of different ducks as well as the wood ducks. You can also do a Google image search, or there's a lot of other reference materials available online as well as through supply companies. But you can't have enough good reference material. One thing that I quick want to touch on is keeping your bird moist while we're working on all the different parts of the mounting process. If this starts to dry out the inside skin, you can go ahead and take a spray water bottle and lightly mist this inside skin. That's going to rehydrate it. An area that a lot of times can have some leakage on is this white spot underneath, pretty much underneath any bird, but especially on a white bird like a wood duck. Sometimes some of the fluids might come out of the skin and start to leak onto it to make a little blood ring or a little greasy ring. So if that happens, you just have to come on with some hydrogen peroxide and clean that off. If you want to avoid that, you can either put a cotton ball in there, or you can put a small piece of this necking and run it up through, and that will help to eliminate some of that leakage that can occur on that. Also, another spot that likes to dry out is the eyes. These different eye rings, they can dry out a lot. We're actually going to be removing these in the process, but you don't want these to dry out. So keep a little cup with water and a little brush and just be dampening these from time to time. You can rehydrate them if need be, if they dry out too much. So we're going to set this aside, and I would actually recommend putting this into a bag temporarily while we're working on these other parts. The first thing that we want to do in the mounting process is pick out a good artificial body that matches the actual carcass size itself. You want to use a body that is the exact same size or very close to the size of the body that you took out of it. To measure these bodies, we want to come from the tail to the front shoulders right here, right where the neck starts. We'll take our tape measure and we'll measure that. Is about 5 inches to 5.5 inches. And then we want to do a girth measurement. It's going to run right around it and measure the girth, which is going to be 8.5 inches. The body that we're going to be using for this is the Mackenzie WFO3 or WFO4, one of those two. There's two different sized wood duck bodies. One's slightly bigger than the other one. This is probably more of the smaller size wood duck body. We can take those measures that we just took and apply it right like this, And this is about 6.5, so it's a little bit too long, so we'll want to go with the next size down. The girth is probably a little big as well. This might work just fine if this bird had a lot of excess fat on it, but even if it does, you pretty much want to go with the actual size of the carcass. The next thing that we want to look at is the size of the neck, or the length of the neck. And we're going to measure this out to be about 4.5 inches. So when we go to cut our neck, we want to make sure it's 4.5 inches long. This is also going to measure the circumference of the neck, and it is 3/4 inches. So we'll use 3/4 inch necking that is 4.5 inches long. A couple of other areas that you want to look at is also the shoulder to shoulder measurement. Now you can use your tape measure to do this, and that will run you right about 2 inches, maybe 1 3/4 inches, or you can use the calipers to get an exact measurement. And we just set this calipers on these 2 ball joints right here of the wing. And we put this right on each one of those joints and pull tight, and then you can measure that distance, which is going to be right at 1 3/4 inches. So we'd want to make sure that on our artificial body that it was 1 3/4 inches, and it's almost perfect, but we are going to grind it in a little bit just to make room for the ball joints and just to give it a little bit tighter profile. If the form is too big in these areas, your wings are not going to sit in right, and they're not going to tuck into your side pockets correctly. And so your wings are going to be bulged out, they're not going to look good on top, and they're going to be pushing your side pockets out, and you're going to have a very hard time grooming everything back in place. So if you use a form that's too big, you're going to really have to fight that skin to get everything to line up correctly. All right, so this is kind of a complex pose, so we're going to have to do some pretty serious modifications to this wood duck form. Like I said, this is a Mackenzie Farabee form. One of the wings is going to be out, and one of the wings is going to be tucked in. One of the legs is going to be up, tucked inside of the bird area, and one is going to be down supporting it. So we have to make some pretty serious adjustments. One of the things that we want to do to start is cut our bird neck. So we measured the bird off camera, and the bird's neck was 4.5 inches long and about 3/4 inches wide. So we're going to use this 3/4 inch necking. And we'll just go ahead and measure this out. Four and a half inches. Now if this was a flying mount, we would cut this straight right here. So it would be flat like this. But because this is going to be a standing mount, we want to do our cut at an angle, so that way it lines up correctly on the back of the artificial bird head. So we're just going to come in at a slight angle, 4.5 inches, cut it off about like this. So now on our artificial head, this will butt right up to it. You don't want to set it up so that way your artificial head on a standing mount butts up like this. Because when you start bending your neck around, you're going to have this big loop here, or this big bend that doesn't look natural. That's not how a duck works. They move with their head like this, so you don't have that bend there for a standing mount. So to start prepping the body, we are going to cut the tail slot. This is going to give us room to put in the tail quills. About like that's fine. A little bit oversized is okay. Gives you a little bit more room to put adhesive and gives you a little bit more ability to manipulate those tail feather quills in there. Because the head on this is going to be tucked back in, we're going to be grooving this part of the back out a little bit more. And because it's also going to be tucked down, we're going to come through and groove this just a little bit more. And to do that, we're going to use our file. You could use a knife. We're going to use a file, and we're just going to file a little bit of a groove in here. And so what this is going to do, this is going to give us the ability to take our neck, after we do the bend down, is bend it back in and give us some room to move in here. So it's not going to be butting up tight against that form. We're going to repeat that here because when we tuck our bird necking in, we want it to be able to tuck into this form area like it would on the natural body. Right now it just butts up against the form. It doesn't give us a lot of room to move. So we want to groove that in. And that's pretty much standard on all standing mounts. You're going to want to make sure that this is grooved in nice. Something that looks about like that. You can do more or less depending on the pose. So we've grooved in those two areas. Now, because one of the wings is going to be out, it's going to be this wing right here. I believe that's what we're going to be going with. We're going to slightly groove out this area where our wing bone is going to sit in. So our humerus ball joint is going to come right here. And if we put it on like it is right now, it would be sticking out too far. You'd have a little bulge in the skin and the feathers wouldn't lay right. So we're going to groove this in to make room for the humerus bone to lay in here nicely, as well as the ulna and radius just to kind of fit in there. So you can do this with a knife or your file. We're just going to slightly groove this out. Make a little depression, little indentation just to get that ball joint in there. You don't have to go as much as you would on a normal standing mount because the wing is going to be out. We just want to give it a little room to move. Just like that. We can put that ball joint right in there now. Now, depending on the method that you use to do your standing mount wings, you can either grind this out to make room for your humerus bone, or you can keep it how it is. We're going to keep it how it is because we're actually going to remove the humerus bone completely because we're not going to need it for this particular method. Different methods call for different things, but in this case, we're going to keep this how it is because we're going to be removing the humerus bone and just pinning the wing in place itself. One other thing that we need to do is because the leg is going to be tucked up into the body, we need to make a groove in here for that to work. Because right now, if we wired our leg bone into the body and we tried to bring that up, it's going to hit right here. So we need to come in and notch this whole area out so our leg bone can swing way up into here. Give us lots of room to move. I take my knife and just kind of groove this area out. I'm also going to do a slight notch inside the form of this breast area, just to make sure I have plenty of room to sink that leg and foot into. Something right about like this right here is perfect. We don't have to worry about this side at all, because this leg is going to be down supporting the bird. Actually, we might just groove it in slightly, because it's the leg on this particular pose. Normally, the leg would be coming down about like this, straight down, but because it's going to be balancing its weight, it's going to be slightly angled in. So I want to make sure that I have room to do that. That should work perfect. Just a little notch just to get that leg to angle down a little bit better. That's pretty much all that there is to modifying this form. We will go ahead and attach the neck to it now. All right, now we're going to attach the neck to the form. For this particular pose, we are going to be using a 14 gauge wire. That's pretty much my standard gauge that I use on all wood duck mounts for the neck. We're just going to cut one end sharp. You can do this on a grinding wheel as well if you want, but this will work fine for now. We'll go ahead and run this right through from this end where the head connects. Come right down. Try to get through the center of the foam if you can, through the foam necking. Sometimes the necking wants to twist around weird, so try to keep it straight and go through the center. We're going to connect this right here on the neck. Just going to push this in. We're going to push it straight back and probably come out somewhere in this region. If you're having trouble getting it through, sometimes these foam bodies can be pretty tough. They don't always pour them the same. So we can go ahead and use a pliers to just push that through the rest of the way. Some of these foams are harder or softer than the other ones. We'll make a loop in the wire, push it in, and just push it down to seat it in. Right like that. We'll go ahead and butt our neck up to the form. Right like that. And we'll remove this excess wire. We only need to keep about I'd say keep about an inch of wire exposed. I normally like to crimp this around just so it doesn't poke holes into the bird when I'm inserting it into the skin later on during the mounting process. Right like that. At this time, we could start to make some bends in the neck to kind of start to achieve the pose that we want. So we'll go ahead and bend the neck down. We'll go ahead and take our finger and run it to about the second joint on your finger, and we'll pull up, just like that. And then we can manipulate this down a little bit more to achieve our desired look. Bring this back. We'll go ahead and sink this into the foam a little bit more. Just push it into this groove that we had notched in. Loop it back. And start to turn the head a little bit. We can do some final adjustments on this during the mounting process, but this is very similar to how it's going to look right here. Now it's going to be hard to insert this into the skin when we're mounting it, so we'll go ahead and push this back out a little bit just to make it a little bit easier to get in. But our bends are pretty much in there already, so we'll know basically how we want this position later on. From here, we'll go on to working with the skin, getting the wings wired up and the legs wired up.